point. Run. Run as fast as you can and pray that he doesn't catch you before they do. To be caught by him would be a much worse fate than whatever they have in store. If the stirring continues, he has found you a good house guest. Take the spoon from him and look at him as you do. Only look at the spoon, and once you have it in your hand, you'll find yourself in your own basement holding the spoon. 3:00 a.m. This spoon is object number 54 of 538. With this object, you can control who lives or dies as you please. After all, is where the heart is. But remember, never let them come together.
One Saturday evening, 3 boys were arrested after an elderly person had seen them enter an electric power station. According to the 3 boys, Jan, Kyle, and Lucius, there was a 4th in their group. Mark must have gotten lost within the power station. They told the officers that before they lost their friend Mark, he had mentioned seeing a girl in a yellow hood. After the police investigated, they found the gruesome, mutilated body of Mark. He died of blood loss due to his throat being cut open, piece missing, as well as one eye. Police didn't find any clues that could show who actually committed. However, the 3 teenagers were the top suspect. 4 hooded teens met in front of an old abandoned power station. They had agreed to meet there a day before because one of the boys, whose name was Lucius, wanted to explore it for his age. They weren't really afraid of the idea. "We should check this place out. Maybe it's haunted," Lucius had explained. "Everything is abandoned," said Mark, rolling his eyes at the others. "So your head is haunted too, Marky?" He was sniggering while Mark was punching his shoulder. The 4 teens entered the decrepit building through a somewhat concealed crack in the wall Lucius had found days ago, each of them ignoring the sign that read, "Warning, do not hazardous." The place smelled slightly metallic beneath the scent of dust. The walls were dirty and bits were damage done by rust and rain. They could barely see the rats running around, for the power station had no windows. It was pitch black within a foot of their faces. Only the cracked ceiling let some light inside. The boys found themselves more than glad that they had at least their phones, which produced enough light for sight. Absorbed and looking at things, the boys came to a room with an electric reactor. The machinery was lying in a puddle of water on the one that had formed because of the rain. As one of the boys was about to step into the room where the murky brown water had pooled, Mark grabbed him by the arm and pulled him back. That thing might still work. Don't you know that electricity flows through water?" "Sorry, I forgot, dude." Kyle rubbed the back of his head awkwardly, looking at his companions as he did. Lucius peered behind him into the room again, curiously. "I think we should leave now. If someone knows that we've been here, we could get in big trouble." His sentence was cut short by Mark's scream. He and the other 2 boys shook as Jan covered Mark's mouth. "The fuck? Dude, do you want—" he whispered aggressively. Slowly uncovering the terrified boy's mouth, Mark's eyes were wide with fear, his face pale. I saw a girl. She was in a yellow hooded jacket with something in her mouth." Jan and Kyle paused before that statement. "Very funny, Mark. Stop screwing around, you idiot." Lucius started to lead the boys out of the creepy abandoned place, unnerved by what his friend had said. Mark shook his head, thinking that it might have been his wild imagination, and started to follow his friends, all the while looking down as he noticed that his shoelaces were untied. "Just wait, I need to tie my shoes." He kneeled down and did so, but as his friends had vanished. They probably hadn't heard him when he said to wait. Afraid, Mark tried to find his way out, walking past the room with the rusted reactor. However, he stopped in front of the door as he saw something move out of the corner of his eye. His head and stood frozen as the light from his phone screen illuminated the figure. Before him, he saw a tall girl facing the corner of the room. Surely with the hood pulled up. Assuming she may be lost like himself, he let out a shaky, "Hello?" And slowly, the strange girl would whisper, "Help me." As the girl turned to him, her head down, he asked her with, "Okay, how can I help you?" Though her head was down, she was still facing in his direction, even with her eyes and mouth closed. He noticed the dried blood on her cheeks. It looked as if it had come from her eye. Hey, you alright?" he questioned louder, worried for her. Mark only heard a loud, "No," from the girl. That he heard her speak, she didn't open her mouth, and suddenly she opened her eyes to reveal empty sockets. The young boy was highly apprehensive as the girl opened her mouth slowly, and was a large grayish-blue eye that was glistening as it looked directly at him. She raised her hands in Mark's direction. Her body slid quickly towards him. He screamed, running out of reach just before she could grab. Feeling afraid for his life, he dropped his phone in his panic. He found himself unable to see his hands around in front of him on the floor. As he walked, it had already gotten dark outside as the sun had set, so the usual light that came from the walls and cracks no longer were there to aid him. Mark stumbled as his foot bumped into something, scooting it across the floor. A surge of hope arose in him as he saw his phone illuminating a few feet away from him, the floor of the plant. He realized that it must have been what he kicked, and he ran as fast as possible towards it and scooped it up. Feeling much more confident, he held up his makeshift flag. His heart nearly stopped as he saw the same girl from earlier. She was there, right in front of him. The singular eye from her mouth. Before he could turn around to run, she grabbed Mark's arm. The eye within her mouth twitched before it slowly split 4 ways. With a horrible expression on his face, Mark saw several sharp teeth emerging from within the eyes, and he screamed in terror. The eye stretched out from within the girl's mouth and latched onto his face, digging into his flesh. Warm blood trickled down his face as Mark's screams got louder. The awful pain added to his desperate calls for help. I slowly peeled the skin off of his face as it released him. The blood was spattering onto the walls as it tossed the flesh aside and the boy's body fell to the ground. I clinged once more onto the boy's head, plucking out his eyes with its teeth, chewing his flesh, swallowing the mush. And when it finished, it retracted once more before it bit harshly into Mark's neck, ripping an artery from the boy's throat and letting him bleed. As he took his last breath, the eye unlatched from Mark's throat, closing itself and retreating back into the ghost girl's mouth. By the time it was for him, the girl had disappeared. Hey there kids, it's me, Mr. Creepypasta, and thank you for watching today's video. And if you're on the podcast, then thank you for watching today's podcast. If you're on not the video or the podcast, then thank you for tuning into this telepathic broadcast. Oh, and there's something I need to... It's actually the big Halloween surprise. I mentioned this early on in the summer, but I never really got a chance to say what it was, because it wasn't really nailed down at the time. We, and by we, Creeps McPasta and Mew, are going on tour across the United States in October. All the dates for it have been nailed down as of actually, and tickets should be going on sale as of actually today. If you'd like to find out more, I'm going to have a bunch of information in the description down below all the way up until the tour. But if you want to get a hold of your tickets, all the venues we've chosen have very limited seating, so make sure you get your tickets now if we're heading to a town near you. And things about this is that I've been able to work with Mew across the United States doing conventions over the past couple of years, but this is the first time I think that Creeps to the US, and it's especially the first time I'm going to be able to work with him live on stage. So this is going to be a show that's bigger than anything I've ever dreamed of being in my entire YouTube career. So check it out down below at marginwalkerpresents.com to get a hold of your tickets and come see us to celebrate Spooktober. Especially, I want to give a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys over at patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta are the best, especially Tracy Carlick, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Wayne Milstead, Dr. Strawberry, Daniel Polson, Champinski, Ken Landau Higuchi, Rev Miroku, Brianna Vin, Nicholas Saeed El Yassin, Buddy Burrows, Stephen Van Huss, Tristan Pelton, Goonington, G. Weevil 3, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, A. Gabrielle DeBaca, the Red Oak Shield Virus, Sandy Barney, Titty Connoisseur, Melissa Swagart, Kudir Max, Jay Curbine, Dante Rao, Last Blade Song, Chris Wrights, The Ginger Bros, Mads Beck Lorenzen Post, Don Molmeister, Eliminator 86, Nebsky, and Jason Silsma, Steampunk Center, and Rafael Rodriguez. If you guys would like to join them, you can head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And that's it for tonight. Dreams, everyone.
By someone that you thought that you could trust? Ever wish that you could have seen it coming? That if only you could what they truly were, the evil soul-sucking bastard that they were. Well, there's a way. You say anything, no, this is not some sort of blood sacrifice to the lord of the underworld. The devil has no such use or desire for the killing of a random creature, and don't you think that he would merely do it himself? However, I wouldn't recommend that you perform this ritual, that if anything does go wrong. I'll leave it to your imagination as to what horrors you'll unleash upon yourself. Instead, I advise you to stop listening, and quite possibly never come back. But if you're truly serious, as you must be to listen up to this point, there is a way. You'll need the following items. A container of salt. Any old stuff from your local store will do, just make sure that you have enough. Match or flint or lighter. A large sheet of paper and a pencil with which to draw. Don't worry either about having to memorize ancient Aramaic or Latin words. And finally, and most importantly, an item of great sentimental value to you. I can't stress enough how important this last item is for reasons. Foremost, being that the ritual will not work without it. Now, what this item is doesn't really matter, as long as it means a lot to you as a person. Special events are recommended, if it was an occasion etched into your memory. If you have a lucky pencil case or something similar, that's also perfect. Also, you have many of, or that you would have little or no problem giving to any but your close friends. Now for the ritual itself. It's best if you can find a place alone, although not essential. But then again, if you don't want a family member walking in on you doing what must appear some insane ritual of the occult, then yeah, you may want to avoid doing it somewhere where you can be disturbed. But ideally, get there about 30 p.m. and make sure that you're bearing no religious icon. Then, I give it great honor to call it a creature, but it's think of. The creature won't see it as a deterrent, as more of an insult. It's the equivalent of breaking into your house, waving his junk in your face. Best case scenario, it doesn't appear. Worst case, they'll find your remains spattered all over the walls. So crucifixes, no stars of David, or anything which represents a faith. Even if the religion isn't real, like one from a video game or movie. It is a bit of a gamble, so best you just avoid it altogether. Next, you must pour salt in a circle, enough for a person to stand in, with relative comfort. Make sure that it's a complete circle. Any breaks in it could prove disastrous. Then, take a pencil and write a paper and place it in the circle. Now light the flame. Hold it in your left hand and your object in your right. As the clock approaches midnight, repeat the following. I turn from the Lord who would hide the true name of his creation to one who will reveal to me the truth hidden within the lies. On the paper, before continuing. To thee, I offer a gift of friendship. Place the object in the circle as circle, then wait until our clock strikes midnight and blow out your candle, so that the dark consumes you. Continue quietly, and then relight the candle. If all has gone to plan, there should be a person standing in the circle in front of you. They won't dare hurt you, or whatever they would do to you would be inflicted tenfold upon them. Yet, you won't feel entirely right either. Divinely beautiful, the person will seem to exude an odor of pure wrongness. as your instincts scream at you. It does not belong in this world. You'll feel icy cold and unable to move, and it should be unable to hear much over the drummet. And the person will introduce themselves as by the name you wrote on the paper, and they accept your generous gift. Wish to repay you. Politely nod and say that it's not necessary. They love manners. Until they say, "Oh, this." You will feel dizzy and fall asleep, only to find yourself in a strange maze when you awaken. It will be overgrown with snaking out across the path, and that sense of wrongness will feel stronger, hanging over you like a fog. Now the real test begins. Stay calm and follow the path until you reach a chamber of sorts. Inside, you'll find a grand feast lay out before you, including all of your favorite drinks. People will be singing merrily and will insist that you come and join them, no matter how mouth-watering it smells. Don't take a single bite. The moment you do, a nagging, aching hunger will fall upon you. No matter how much you eat and eat, you'll be able to shake this inescapable hunger, and you shall be stuck in an endless cycle of gluttony until you literally, and with unimaginable thirst, under the weight of all that food. Walking into the next chamber, you will discover no people, but instead a vast treasure trove. Everything from that would make those of the Queen of England seem like a child dressed up, set in gold statues, all the way to the latest technology, from the newest, fastest car to the latest computer system. Don't even think about touching it. It's what he wants you to do. The moment you deliberately touch anything penny, you'll feel your arm go numb and heavy. With horror, you will have just enough to realize what is happening before your body turns to solid gold. Or for the next greedy soul to enter the room. Assuming you made it into the third chamber unmolested, you should feel incredibly weary from the apparent reason. I advise you to get the hell out of there as quickly as possible. No matter how comfy it would seem to simply close your eyes for a second, it's the worst thing you could do. Feel your muscles weigh like a ton, and may even hear soft, gentle lullabies on the wind. But to fall asleep here would be to never our dreamless sleep. Don't get me wrong. You would not be dead, but neither would you truly be alive. You would be falling endlessly in a black void of time, and the heavens fall. The fourth room will be almost bare, bar from a few people. The moment you enter, they'll start snickering and jeering at you. They'll do things that you personally find insufferable. They'll poke you with sharp objects, call you names, tell you how worth you are. Just block them out and walk on. For those that succumb to their anger will be forever locked in that moment of inflamed emotion, unable to raw hatred until you're little more than a savage beast with instincts to rip and tear. No sooner than you have entered the fifth area, fronted with a vast crowd of adoring fans, all screaming your name, people will revel in your every movement and beg that you tell them how to escape the previous rooms, will practically bow to you, and armies will march at but your slightest command. Anything you create, no matter how badly made or written, will be an nation, and people will feel compelled to give you stuff. As easily as it is to fall into a false sense of security, I advise you to move on as soon as possible. The longer one stays, the more they will begin to suspect that not everything is as it seems. They'll see a knife under every cloak, and an assassin in every shot. Once great pride has reduced them to naught but a shivering wreck of paranoia and madness. The next room should resemble an ornate bedchamber, with some heavy in the air. Lying on a bed will be several of the most physically beautiful and alluring people you'll have ever seen. How they learn whatever is most attractive to you. Different people have described anything from long-legged women with enormous breasts and flowing hair to mixed six-packs and rippling muscles, and sultry voices that'll ask you to come to bed for an evening of romance. You must politely decline. Provoke them. If you give in to your lust, or indeed give any such sign, they'll keep you there for eternity, as of which they'll perform all kinds of perverted tortures that even the most filthy human mind would find horrifying to behold. Finally, find yourself in an empty room. Standing in front of you will be the figure from before, although the sense of wrongness should feel They'll stand before 2 doors with a smile unnaturally wide. They'll congratulate you and ask you which gift you wish to receive. The first on the left. This will send you back in time when before you committed the ritual. You will have no knowledge of what transpired and would be promised blissful ignorance, so much so that no one will be able to hurt you. Do not walk through this door. He wants you to. He's continuing on your end, the possible gift of bliss. Choose that door and you will have blissful ignorance, for you shall no longer have any soul or intelligence, reduced to little more. Once you've walked through the door on the right, you should wake up in your empty room. And yet you'll feel straight forth. You'll be able to smell a lie before it's even spoken, and be able to tell a person's goal at but a glance. This is also a curse, for never again will you be able to look at your loved ones in the same way, for fear of discovering their true nature. There's a reason some people choose on the edge of social groups, and if you pay attention, you'd see us for what we've been through. Because for us, who've experienced true evil, nothing is hidden.
Do you have someone that you hate? Someone you would do anything to hurt? Pay any price for vengeance? If so, you may want to consider visiting Lightless City. To get there, go to any decent-sized city and find a deserted alley. Go into it, and close your eyes as tightly as you can. Whisper, "Lightless City," and concentrate on the darkness. You've probably noticed that there are faint colors and abstract shapes you can make out if you try to focus your eyes when they're closed. Watch those images go by. After a few minutes, the images will start to get clearer and brighter. When this happens, they'll start to take a detailed form. Images of violent murders, deformed animals, and similar things. No matter what you see, keep your eyes closed. You'll start to lose track of time, but eventually the images will stop, and you'll see pure blackness, nothing but deep black, no colors or shapes. When you're certain that you see pure darkness, open your eyes. You'll now be in a very dark city. There won't be a single light or star in the sky. You should be able to see a faint dark blue outline of the tall buildings surrounding you. Make your way out of the alley, and walk as quietly as you can down the sidewalk in any direction. If you hear any movement, run! Run as quickly as you can away from the noise. There are animals in Lightless City. It's too dark to make out the details, but they're the size of large, wild felines, and will kill any human that they catch. Keep moving until you reach an area with smaller buildings, the edge of the city. A child will approach you, his face dully glowing, letting you see that he's eyeless. Will you share your light with me? Say yes. The child will reach for your face and rip out your right eye. It will be painful, but there shouldn't be any bleeding or open wound. The child will thank you and leave. Keep walking. A tall man will appear before you. Whose light do you wish to have taken away? Speak the name of the person that you hate, and as soon as you say their name, they will be completely and irreversibly blind. Is your hatred satisfied? The man will ask. If it is, say yes, and you will awaken in the alley. If not, say no, and the man will disappear. Keep walking. You'll come across another eyeless child. Will you share your light with me? Say yes, and your left eye will be torn out, leaving you blind. Keep walking, and the tall man will appear again. Although you, of course, will have to rely on his voice. Whose life do you wish for the darkness to claim? Say the name of the one that you hate, and they will die. You'll not be asked if your hatred is satisfied this time, and you'll not be able to return to the alley. I told you, make sure you really hated someone before doing this. You will spend the rest of your life wandering around like the city, blind, with only your hatred to keep you warm. And for some, that's enough.
The first time Isaac tried to warn me, I woke up to the sound of tapping. Before my eyes completely snapped into focus, I studied the half-form standing in the dark. The empty bed next to mine where Isaac used to sleep, and beyond the bed, my one window. The slight movement of the moonlit curtain and the thing that looked back at me from the curtain, the dark stain of a shadow, an eclipse with a human shape. In the moment it takes my eyes to adjust, I listen to its tapping on the glass. I climb out of bed, sliding on Sleepwalker's feet, a gnawing itch in the back of my mind telling me what I already knew was there at the window. I throw open the curtain. Nothing but the indifferent dark. My brother Isaac was all and mop-top hair and jeweled big eyes. He disappeared one day in late September. I remember the day clear as anything, the rumor in the leaves and air with an oncoming bite. On the night before it happened, in the secrecy of our room, Isaac tells me about his discovery. "I call it a fairy gate," he told me, eyes deadlocked onto mine, twinkling across the dark between our beds. It was 5 years ago. I was the only person in the world he trusted to keep his loved him for that. The more I think about that night, the more I come to realize how, unlike myself, he was to go off into the woods alone, comfortable as he was exploring his books. He told me once that if he could purchase out of books, he would run away to that place if he could. This was his little conspiracy. He conspired with me one more on that night. He told me about the fairy gate. He told me it was the entrance to that fortress, the trees themselves sculpted out of loose paper. I remember the last thing he told me. In the morning, Isaac was gone. The window was wide open, curtain billowing in the wind, waving a lonesome goodbye. Sometimes I wish I could have known my brother, grown up with him, protected him, loved him, be loved by him. Then I remember the eyes. I remember, and I hope to God every day that he stays dead. All I have now is hope. I still can't shake the feeling of cold hands, my ribcage, or the feeling of eyes pouring out of the hungry woods. There were search parties in those first few days. Many people prayed for us, for Isaac. Few of them even cried. There was an unspoken agreement that the worst was to be expected. In those early days, I would skirt down hallways at school through a relentless torrent of whispering, hushed conversations between adults, barbed by nasty rumors, and trickling down to the vicious mouths of their children. A kidnapping, some said. Neighbors must have planned it for weeks. Others saw him run off to escape a drunken beating from our father. A few kids swore that he never left. He was locked away in the basement, my basement, wrapped up tight as a Christmas gift. Isaac was a shadow that loomed over my house. My parents stopped speaking. To me, to each other. They just stared off into the distance. Hard lines set around their mouth. Faces carved out of marble. Footsteps ringing hollow through empty halls. Isaac came back to the window every night. I didn't try to open the curtain again, but he never stopped. I'm another part of the house. Something to let fade into the background and something to fall asleep to, but Isaac would not let himself be forgotten so easily. I lay awake one night when the rhythmic tap, tap, tap went still. That and quiet was so much more alarming just knowing it was coming from his restless dead hands. I held my breath. I waited out that silence, listening for him, for anything. I know it was a silly thing to do, but I closed my eyes. I shut myself off from the room and rested in the closet. When Isaac struck the window, my heart leapt into my throat. I went up to the bonnet and I peeled it back, a tiny knot of cracks nestled there in the middle of the glass. His voice came floating into the room from outside, crackling like static. To this day, I the words aside, but his voice still crawls into the back of my head. The voice, and with it, a new sensation like 1,000 eyes, stalking me from the trees. 2 of them, Isaac. I never told my parents about the feeling in the woods. All the same, I was forbidden from going outside. The sole exception to this rule was the walk to and from school. Week after worthless week, these walks became like any other routine. There was one afternoon the sun was belting a brilliant song from a clear, cold sky. I left my mind to wander along the ghosts of leaves pressed into the sidewalk like wet hands. Something about the way the colors bled into the pavement, a fragile signature. The spaces in between houses getting longer the closer I got to my house, until the mailboxes became little outposts in between the trees. Every now and again a car would roar past me just to disappear further up the road. My own mailbox came into view. I marched away towards the rear of the house, up and up the steps of my porch. Then I remember all of a sudden my hand stopped just shy of the doorknob. I didn't dare move them closer. The muscles in my neck tightened. My other hand hangs tense by my side, fist clenching open and shut. I feel the eyes on my face the woods. A pale figure standing scarecrow still, just inside the shade of the tree line. I recognize the curly brown hair. I paused for long enough to recall a flashlight in the kitchen. I rushed inside to grab it and was back on the porch in no time. Scarecrow already gone. In my grip, the flashlight becomes the hilt of a sword. The last thing I hear before I follow the scarecrow into the woods was the crash of the porch door in full swing, and my mother calling out to me. Her voice, a thin passenger, carried off in the wind. It was well ahead of me by then. I ran until the noises of the town, the bustle of traffic, the orchestra of noise that was the ironworks was swallowed up by the trees. I darted past, grasping limbs and treacherous roots, coming to rest against the elbow of a quick-moving stream. The sun, half hidden behind the canopy, cast a rippling light and shade over my face as I ran beside the crumpling bank. Underneath the chirp and sigh of the stream, the silence of the surrounding forest swelled by the atmospheric pressure. Icicles clutched in my stomach. The tree towered over me like a crooked came into view of my brother's discovery. My lungs were heavy with sand. The shallow of stones met between the banks of the stream, the far side of which was guarded by a pair of gnarled birch trees. Twin white trunks, each bent towards the other, crowns twisting together into a narrow hands, as if to form a gate. As I moved closer, the scarecrow flickered inside the open arms of the fairy gate. From so close I could see that his hands were blackened with soil. In place of eyes sank 2 cavernous holes, and where his chest should be, a red wound opened. Dirt came crumbling out of his mouth as he spoke, the words formless, impossible, but still the same. Shadows walk. Isaac turned and vanished into the fairy gate. It stood before me in the beam of my flashlight, beckoning. I flew across the stream after my brother and through the arms of the gate. It didn't feel anything like the embrace of a fortress walls. It's more like walking into the mouth of hell. A faint dirt path stretched away behind the gate, with rough grass whispering out from the ground. Isaac left no footprints in the dirt. Not far from the stream, the low ceiling of branches opened up into a secret glen, a halo of green 100 feet wide underneath a blue ceiling of sky. The air was warm, and all the leaves surrounding were green, swayed around my ankles, frozen into perpetual summer. I dared to take a step into the garden. In the corner of the garden was a circle of charred earth. I took another step, bent my head closer. A patch of bare ground no larger than I was. My gaze fell onto a white sapling growing from the barren scar. The closer I crept towards the sapling, fixated by it, pulling into it like a rogue plan what it was. I was looking at a human arm, pushing up neatly into the shoulder, the ground surrounding it having been torn up with claw marks, and beside the sapling arm, underneath the shade of the flesh-blossoming hand. Crowning from the torn soil was the top half of a head, row of teeth peeking out just above the dirt, a few fingers already starting to sprout next to the head. This is not a burial, I thought, looking down at the grim garden. This is a birth. The hands all bony angles, the head topped with brown curls, and the eyes, jewel blue eyes. The sapling arm twitched once, shot outward with bone-breaking speed. I stumbled backwards onto the ground, struggling for release from the vice grip. It dragged me closer. I caught sight of its eyes, and oh God, the wet sucking sound they made as they rolled in their wet sockets to look at me. A new surge of panic overflowed into my blood. I pulled myself away from the wicked thing, scrambling to my feet, and I ran out of the garden as fast as my legs could carry me. My parents had been waiting for me inside the house. The sigh of relief at the sight of me running through the door, filthy and shaking, was the most beautiful sound in the world. My mother held me close. She let the tears roll down her cheeks, even as Isaac's warning was still ringing in my ears. Sleep didn't find me that night. The more I thought about it, and I do think about it every night, running through the encounter over and over again in my head, the of Isaac's last words, his true last words whispered to me through his broken mouth ago. Shadows walk. Sometimes I dream of cold hands reaching up from the glen, fleshing into gruesome trees, paper white skin, blue veins, growing into a forest to strangle my brother's skeleton body, pushing out of the ground, out of the grinning mouth of his skull, tangled around his body like root in his eye sockets. But Isaac didn't return that night, or any other night. I followed the stream every day afterwards for weeks, as Isaac must have done hundreds of times before me. Now it just keeps going till the water empties out of the sharp edge of a hill. Doesn't matter how many times I double back, retrace my steps. All of a sudden, Stepping Stone Bridge is nowhere to be found. Ferry Gate's gone. So is my brother. The only thing I can do now is wait. Hey there kids, it's me, Mr. Creepypasta, and I just wanted to say thank you for watching today's video. I want to try to wrap this video up quick, so I'm going to let you know about a couple of things real quick. First one is, I'm going on tour. If you want to check out more information about that, head over to creepypasta.shofetti.com. That's creepypasta.shofetti.com. If you want to support the show, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta to buy some nice warm tea for a dark and stormy story time. Check out m/shop/Ivory Monocle Tea. Sweet dreams, kids. $15 since I last left this place. 131 hours, 487 minutes since I last saw the other. That's a long time. A long time to think, a long time to wonder, a long time for the human brain to create and invent scenarios. As flat as my sanctuary, and my prison, my curse, and my gift. The funny thing, the human brain, it contains 100 billion neurons. 100 billion divided by the number of years I've been stuck here is 6.6 billion. 66 was the year I was born in a quiet little council house in Leeds. Leeds has 5 letters. 5 times 3 is 15. The number always wins. They are always right. 100 billion neurons within the brain. Changed.
Agoraphobia. Its definition is the fear of being in open spaces or large crowds. I fit that description. I have a good reason. See, my brain has somehow become rewired and forces its isolation on me. The one thing I felt forced to do in order to keep people safe has now entrapped me. Nature finds a way to keep up the balance, though, and the thing it took from me, it replaced with something else, something special. I spend my days writing. When I have my weekly shopping delivered, I also request 2 notepads. I write at approximately 28 words per minute, which, granted, is a little below average, but enough for my needs. I use pads of A4 paper, each of which contain 50 sheets of lined paper with a vertical pink margin line on the right. 28 subtracted from 50 is 22. And that's how old I was when the accident happened. That's how old I was when I got my gift. It was my age when life gave and took away in the cruel way that it knows best. I'll get to that in good time, though. First, I have to go back to when I was a child, back to when I can explain how I came to be in this situation. I've told this story countless times. It's within the notepads I've already filled, but with nobody to listen, I see no harm in telling it again. It will at least serve to show you how everything comes back to the numbers. If nothing else, at least they tell the truth. 71. 1971 in England, unemployment is at an all-time high. Arsenal have beaten Liverpool 2-1 in the FA Cup final. Scottish Formula 1 driver Jackie Stewart has won the Monaco Grand Prix. 1971. 19 plus 1 makes 20. I was 10 when it started. 10 taken away from 20 is 10. Again, 10 is an important number. 71 minus the number of years since I left this place comes to 56. 56 is how old my father was when he first raped my sister. She was 7. For 3 years it went on. 7 plus 3 is 10, my age when it all started. 10 is an important number. 13 is said to be an unlucky number. For my father, it was exactly that. 13 was the number of times I stabbed him with the knife as he mounted my beloved sister 1 too many times. 7 in the back, 3 in the side, 3 in the balls. For good measure. It took him 8 minutes to bleed out. When he was begging me to stop, he said my name 10 times. 10 is an important number. There were 7 people at his funeral, which, as you know, was the same age my sister was when he started his vile attacks. 7 people there. 7 letters in funeral. An anagram for funeral is real fun. Real fun. Was what I had when I watched him die. Nobody cried at my father's funeral, not a single one. My sick son of a bitch. 8 is the number of years I was in the psychiatric hospital after the attack. My doctor's name was Ethan. My sister was called Erica. Both began with the letter E. E is the 5th letter of the alphabet. 5 times 3 is 15. 15 is the number of years since I left this place. 15 of minutes since I hit the man over the head who was trying to break into my home. 15 is also a very important number. 15. I wrapped the rope around each wrist 15 times before I tied him to the chair. He's been unconscious now for almost 10 minutes. 10. 10 is a very important number. 10 from 15 leaves 5. 5 minutes until midnight. Midnight is struck at 12. Tomorrow is the 12th of the month. The 12th was also the date my sister committed suicide. She was 11. 11 when she decided it was easier to jump off the roof of a multi-story car park than have to deal with the psychological nightmares of what happened to her.
11 was how old she was when she realized that she was broken beyond repair. There were 6 people at my sister's funeral. Plenty of tears were shed. My sister was a beautiful human being. My father was 56 when he died. 5 plus 6 equals 11. 11 is how old my sister was when she killed herself because of what my father had done to her. My father mocks me even in death. The man who broke into my home is starting to wake. His eyes filled with that vacant of someone who had recently had his brain rattled. I look around and I see my flat as he will see it. The newspapers which I have kept over the years, yellowed mountains, reaching from floor to ceiling in haphazard towers in every available space. A life's worth of clutter exists here. A home no more than a rabbit run of corridors made from junk and clutter which I can't bear to part with. I can't recall the color of the carpets. I can't recall the shapes of some of the rooms. It's a distant thing to me now. How this place would look without all those things I surround myself with. My intruder is awake now and moaning, blood starting to dry in thick clumps in his greasy hair. I tell him not to scream, that nobody will bother us here no matter how much he shouts. I tell him to be quiet and let me think. He listens, seeing in my eyes that I'm deadly serious. He knows I'm in control and does as he's told. At midnight, the birth of a new day. 12 times 2 is 24, minus 1 each for me and my intruder. That leaves 22. 22 is the age I was when I first got my gift. 22. 22 is an important number. My intruder is agitated and starting to panic and make noise. I ask him again to be quiet. This time he doesn't listen. Fear will do that every time. I'm forced to hurt him. I don't want to do it. But I have no choice. I imagine my father and his pale, bloodless face nodding in approval as I hit the man again in the head with a skillet, silencing these noises and bringing out a fresh torrent of blood from his wound. I ignore the mocking sneer of my dead father and the expression that says the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I ignore it and whisper my apologies to the unconscious man. 22. 22 when it happened. Crossing the road, minding my own business, not my fault. The driver was drunk. He claimed he didn't see me. It still didn't stop him from driving over and leaving me for dead in the gutter. 20 broken bones. 22 minus 20 leaves 2. There were 2 people in the car, just like there are 2 people here in my flat. 22 was my age when it happened. 22 is an important number. I don't remember the pain. I was beyond that. I remember the faces swimming in and out of my consciousness, their expressions telling me all I needed to know. I was in a bad way. I remember a priest. He gave me the last rites there on the road. I was dying. I was dying. But I wasn't afraid. I couldn't feel it. I didn't die. And sometimes I wish I had. Instead, I spent several months in the hospital. In rehabilitation. 7 was the age of my sister when my father first raped her. The same number of people who were at the funeral in which nobody cried. The word funeral contains 7 letters. It's also an anagram for real fun. Real fun wasn't something I had during my rehabilitation. That's when the pain I was spared during the accident was delivered to me with interest. It was also where I discovered my gift. Depression is a real thing. Depression affects 1 in 5 people in the United Kingdom. 1 in 5 is 15. 15 is the number of years since I last left this place. 1 in 5 is 15. 15 is the number of years since I left this place. 15 is a very important number.
15% of all people diagnosed with clinical depression die from suicide. I slit my wrists on the 13th of October. 13 for the number of times I stabbed my father when I decided I had to kill him because I couldn't bear to hear the sounds of when he was raping my sister. 15% of all people with clinical depression die from suicide, and I wasn't one of those people. My gift saved me, although I did try. The pain as my blood spattered onto the floor. Bright red on stark white. The instinctive grip as I grabbed at the 3-inch cut that I had made on my wrists. Blood welling up between my fingers as I waited to be taken away from this awful place. Then warmth. Light. Then my wound stopped bleeding, then my wound was gone. And then I realized I was still in this awful place. My gift. My curse. 22 when it happened. Then 15 years since I left this place. Both very, very important numbers. 37. The number of years since I last left this place added to the age that I was when the accident happened. It was also the age of my intruder, according to the driver's license in his wallet. His name is Marcus. He has a picture in there of a smiling family, attractive wife and daughter who has his eyes. They mean nothing to me. Marcus. Marcus was the name of my father. My father is dead. I killed him when I was 10 by stabbing him 13 times. I had to do it to stop him from raping my sister. My sister was 7 when it started, and 10 when I stopped it. She died when she was 11. My father and my sister are both dead. I didn't die. Instead, got a gift. The gift of life. A gift I don't want. I learned I could heal things by touching them. Something in the crash has reorganized my brain or triggered something locked away that humans have had but can't use. Whatever it is, I have it. My hands can sense illness, cancers, tumors, broken bones. I can fix things. I can heal people. I tried to heal people, tried to share my gift. Nobody listened. They hit me, they spat on me when I tried to fix them. They scared me, they threatened me, called me a weirdo and a freak, a pervert, and a pedophile, all because I walked with a limp and I have these scars on my face and my body from the crash. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. And no one will listen. Nobody cares. And so I write it down, just like this. Just like the other notepads, they're stacked and organized by date. My thoughts, my feelings all on paper. All like this one. 15. 15 years since I last left this place. 15 years is a long time to be lonely. To be isolated from everyone. Through no fault of your own, 15 is a very important number. Marcus is moving again. His eyes are glassy and roll into his skull. He looks at me, sees the scars, sees the place I live in. His eyes grow wide. He's afraid. Afraid of me. Afraid of how I look, judging me just like them, just like the others. Rage. That tight knot of fire in my belly, it sits there and simmers like me. It's sick. Sick of the ridicule, sick of the mocking, the humiliation, the irony. That I might be sickest of all and can't cure myself isn't lost on me. Scared now. Scared of what's going to happen because I know I can't stop it. 2. The number of thumbs I push into his windpipe as the rage takes over. 50. The number of seconds until he stops struggling and takes his last breath, and I hope that's all it will take, but the rage won't be satisfied. I know that. I have no power when it takes over. 1. The number of knives I bring back from the kitchen, still somewhere else, still controlled by that fire, which has spread from my belly and has become an inferno. 33. The number of times I stab him, hacking, slashing. Even the feeling of bone grinding against blade can't stop me. It's only when the filthy knife snaps that the frenzy ends. 2, 51, 33 add together to make 86. 86% of all murders in England and Wales are committed by men. I'm a man. I'm a murderer. I also have a gift. It's been 15 years since I last left this place because I killed my father when he raped my sister. She was 7. 30 minutes it takes. My hands dance over the man's body, closing wounds, repairing skin. Tears hot on my cheeks. I don't want this. I don't want any of this. I don't know how it works. It just happens. I don't put back what's gone. That's not how my gift operates. The mess is still there, the blood all over my hands, all over the stacks of notebooks and yellowed newspapers, which I have delivered weekly. The broken knife still has clumps of flesh attached to the edge of the blade, but my gift grows it back, puts new blood back into his body, repairs broken bones, seals flayed skin, no blood, no wounds, good as new. 2 hands, 4 fingers, 1 thumb on each. 10 appendages in total. They move with a life of their own. I have no control over them as they put back what I've broken. They find an undiagnosed brain tumor. The hands dance over the base of the skull. Tumor's gone. 1. One breath. A sharp intake of air, and Marcus is alive. He blinks from his place on the floor, chair on its side. I smile at him, knowing that now he must understand my gift. How I'm misunderstood. But all he sees is the blood all around him. Blood which was in him but has not been replaced. He doesn't understand. They never do. He sees the broken knife discarded in the dusty fireplace, wet baubles of clear dust clinging to it. Then he sees me, the scars, the blood. I see as he puts it all together. The look appears in his eyes again, the horror, the revulsion, and in turn it triggers the rage. I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to use my gift for good. Why don't they ever understand? Why are they so quick to judge? The fire in my belly reignites, and before I can stop myself, I'm on him again. I'm doing the work that I had just done, killing that which I had given life back to for the second time. 4. 4 times the process repeats itself. Life, death, life, death. On the 5th, I decide I'm going to keep him. Nobody knows he's here. Nobody would think to look. I know he's aware of everything that happens to him. Unlike me, he can feel, and for that I'm envious. He gives me that look, that wide glare. That fearful, haunted expression of absolute hopelessness. 7. 7 words, he says. 7 words to which I don't have an answer. When will you just let me die? It's a good question. And one that set me to thinking about the response. 15, I tell him. Just before the rage takes over and I kill him again. 15. 15 years since I left this place. 15 is a good number. 15 is a very, very important number. 15 plus 15 is 30. 30 is how old my sister would have been this year. 15. 15 years since I left this place. 131 hours, 487 minutes since I last saw the outside world. That's a long time. A long time to think, a long time to wonder, a long time for the human brain to create and invent scenarios. This flat is my sanctuary and my prison, my curse and my gift, but at least now I'm not alone. At least now I have someone to share those years with. And maybe the next 15 won't be so lonely after all.
Janine sat as silently as she could, hunched over her laptop, listening to the rain tap the outside of the cafe like a billion tiny fingers, and trying her best to let the dim blue glow of her screen lull her into a comfortable trance. But she couldn't do that. Not while he was watching her. He had been watching her for a while now. She didn't know when he had actually entered the cafe, but she had felt his gaze lying cold and heavy on the back of her neck for several hours. Janine was not the type of person who could relax and enjoy a day. She didn't celebrate life for what it was, or live in the now, or any of that. No, Janine was a worrier. Had been since she was young. Janine often felt like the only sane person in her small circle of associates. She would never call them friends. They were happy, brash, and confident, ready to attack life with the kind of vigor only the truly ignorant could muster. She always wondered why they couldn't see what she saw. Murder, rape, economic collapse, drought, rampant racism, and corruption that had latched onto every facet of government like a leech. How could they be so upbeat, so happy, when the world they lived in was falling to pieces, rotting, and caving in like the belly of something dead? Janine had become so overwhelmed by what was happening around her that she now rarely left her home. She secluded her way from the outside and its disgusting reality, first trying to cope with the isolation by chatting with people online. When they failed to alleviate her loneliness, she turned to her TV and her gaming systems. But what little entertainment they offered soon soured under her fears. So she had opted to down pills, drink profusely, and sleep as much as she could, in between brief surges of managing her little website, whittling away the days until what? No, she knew what. She just couldn't bring herself to think on that at the moment. Really, this trip to the cafe, the first in a very long time, was just her way of testing the waters, hoping against hope that the world had changed in the time that she had been away. But the grit and grime that covered her little urban sprawl hadn't been washed away in the rain. The news was still bad. The people were still desensitized and crass. The air still stank of fumes. It really was hopeless. Janine heard a car alarm go off, somewhere in the distance. The sound made her wince, and she felt herself mentally taking check of her own body to ward off the fear that was boiling in her gut like bile. Her body was wasted from lack of decent food, her skin was pale from lack of sun, and her hair was greasy. She knew that she smelled ripe, like feet and spoiled milk. And she could taste what she had eaten 3 days before, congealing between her yellowing teeth. And that was just the outside. Janine knew she was faring even worse, just beneath the surface. Her stomach felt deflated, shot through with the occasional pain of hunger or indigestion. Her eyes ached constantly. Her gums ached, and her libido had long since failed her. She was a dying machine, and she knew it. And she wondered if he knew it, too. She chanced to look over her laptop and shuddered. He hadn't moved an inch since she had last looked. His eyes, pale and dull, utterly lifeless, were still fixed on her. He was sealed almost to the opposite side of the cafe, his lanky frame clothed in a gray hoodie and white sweatpants, his feet shod in what looked like white socks of some kind. Janine wondered if the waitress or someone in charge would come over to evict him for defying their no shoes, no shirt, no service policy, but she highly doubted that anyone would want to get close enough to him to even try. Even from across the way, Janine could still tell that there was something deeply wrong about the man. The boneless way his head lolled to one side, the utter stillness of his posture that was only rarely broken by a low, silent breath. The way he never once spoke, or even acknowledged the people around him. And then, there was his face. Janine wasn't quite sure if it was a trick of the light, her own tired eyes, the remnant of the pills in her blood, or some combination thereof, but it seemed to her as though the man was deformed in some subtle way. The face lacked any facial hair. Even his brows were bare. His skin was pale and clean and utterly devoid of blemishes, like the face of a newborn. His nose seemed to be small and flat. His eyes were perfect ovals with wet, gray orbs set in fleshy sockets, and his lips were thin and colorless. All of those features were worrying enough, but there was something else that unnerved Janine on a far more primitive level. In the entire time that he had been staring at her, the man hadn't smiled or frowned, hadn't parted his lips to breathe, hadn't flared his nostrils, hadn't even blinked. He just stared. Those icy, stagnant water eyes of his bored into her from across the room, studying her, judging her, sizing her up. It was the kind of gaze that she always thought a rapist or serial killer might give a potential target. And yet, there was no lust in those eyes, no interest, no mirth, just something that she couldn't grasp, something small and half submerged within those eyes of his, like the slimy end of a worm in the mud. Outside, the rainfall intensified. A man shouted for a cab. A woman screamed at someone whose response was lost with a clap of thunder. And a man's gaze stayed on her, never wavering. I have to leave, Janine thought, feeling the suffocating grasp of oncoming panic begin to tighten around her neck. She shut her laptop, wincing at how loud the click of plastic on plastic seemed to reverberate off the tiled walls of the cafe. She stood up, tucked her $600 distraction into her backpack, and walked towards the front door with as much haste as she dared show. The man followed her tentative, stiff movements with his dull eyes that never blinked. She opened the door and stepped out into the rainy night, glad to be free of his gaze. The rain was refreshingly cold against her warm skin, but Janine found little pleasure in the chill. She was a woman, out alone, at night, in the vast, dark city. which stank of smog and fumes, and the collective funk of thousands of sweating humans clustered together. She wondered if the stink would stick to her skin, if it would ever come off. She had tried to be more considerate, had tried to find one small speck of light in the gloom, but the foul stench that invaded her nostrils, the piss-tasting coffee of the cafe, and the constant noise, and the frightening gaze of the smooth-faced man had proven to her once and for all that she was living in an abattoir. I might as well just leave, she thought, briefly allowing herself to envision her smiling doppelganger riding away from the filthy metropolis in her beat-up Chevy, the sickness in her body being blown away on the fresh rural breeze. But no. She knew that those places held their own dangers too. There were no safe havens in the world. Slap, 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 slap. She stopped in her tracks. Slap, 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 slap. It sounded like bare feet on concrete. Who would be out here in the weather without shoes? Slap, 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 slap. Probably some druggie, she thought, her mind immediately conjuring an image of a wasted, dirty person in rags, grime-encrusted clothing, reaching out with a gnarled, grungy hand, with entreaties for change uttered from between missing teeth. Slap, 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 slap. Janine began to pick up her pace, but to her horror, she found that her withered, nutrient-starved muscles had not yet adjusted to their renewal usage. Slap, 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 slap. I can't turn around, she thought. If it were some bum or junkie, they would have called out already. This is something else. The thought quickened her heart, sent nausea rolling through her stomach, and tightened her throat at the same time. All the images that she had come across that had kept her up at night, all those reports and news stories that she had read, despite her knowing that it would add more weight to her already fracturing spirit, all came rushing back to her like a tidal wave. Slap, 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 slap. She turned a corner and forced herself to run despite the sudden pain that the movement brought. As she did, she turned and gazed behind her. There, still following at the same pace as before, bathed in the eerie, gaudy hues of a dozen neon lights, was the smooth-faced man from the cafe, his pale skin and his eyes glowing in the dimness like some abhorrent fish from the darkest depths of the ocean. Slap, 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 slap.